Hi, I'm Dr. Saira.
And I'm Texas Peck. And here we are again.
Okay, so last week we talked about a taboo, something people don't really talk about in therapy.
Yeah, and it's been a bit of a challenge, right?
Well, yeah, I was pressing kind of like upload on that video and I had to call Texas and Monique, his wife, and be like, are we really doing this?
Yeah.
Are we really putting this out there? So if you haven't seen that video.
Right. So one of the things that we want to say is that when you come in and talk with us or be part of this, we're going to be uncomfortably honest if that's what's necessary. Because we can't not do that. It keeps us trapped, right?
I think about like birth, like something new is going to be born, but there's going to be some discomfort.
I'll take your word for it.
It's uncomfortable,
yeah,
to say the least.
So, all right.
We just got interrupted. Somebody walked in.
So if there's a little glitch in the video, that's what that was. But what we wanted to bring together today was something that's really dear to my heart, and I think to Dr. Saira's heart, is a piece around our relationship and kind of how that mirrors what we would like to have happen in the field, right? How do we say that? Like, so, it's a tricky thing, right?
It's a tricky thing because we started talking about, before this video, we were talking about the practice of therapy and how, or any sort of Western medicine, right? And how in Western medicine, the practitioner, whether that be your doctor, your physiotherapist, your chiropractor, your
doesn't matter,
psychotherapist, whoever, has this kind of professional distance from the patient, and they're actually trained in that.
Yeah. So right? and so we're talking about that kind of that top down, that Westernized thing.
I've got the solutions. I've done all this studying. I have information. Right. I'm going to impart that on you, who doesn't really know much about your body or your mind or your
right. And I think you have a better lens on this, but I mean, that mostly came from a Western masculine place, right? Of just, here's the boxes, we got to check them all off.
Right.
And
here's the person, and we're going to divide them into these different areas, right? So there's your arms, and then there's your legs, and then there's your spine, and then there's your brain, and then there's your, I don't know, your large intestine. So it's like we've kind of fractured the person into these different parts, and then we have different specialists that address those different parts who actually never talk to each other often.
Right.
And so that's kind of how we've seen the human experience as this machine. And Monique writes about that in her book, about this human machine. And that's kind of the approach that we've taken to health and wellness, which is really, really problematic and flawed.
It is really. And so from the other lens, there's this, and we see this across the board. One of the things that we get really at the Expansion Project here, we're really getting a lot of folks that are from both sexes. So typically in a meditation group, often you will see it's
mostly women.
Yeah.
And we know that from the research, right? Most people who are seeking wellness services tend to be people who identify as women. And what's surprising, it's been surprising to us since we started our meditation circle, is we often have like a 40-60, sometimes 50-50 split, which is not the norm.
Right.
And so we were getting curious, like, how are we doing that? Like, what is it that we're bringing that's attracting more people who identify as men into this space?
Right.
And I think a big part of it, and as we've kind of like teased apart, what is it? It's because we're offering a balanced viewpoint, right? We're bringing the rigor of the science, and we're also bringing the spontaneity, flexibility, and flow of the art of helping.
So even in a really practical sense, like we want to, this is maybe sounds really picky, but we were really specific about this. If we commit to do something, we like to try to do it on time, right?
We do it on time.
Yeah, but what happens inside that container? We want to give that some free flow, right?
Which is sometimes different than some kind of spiritual circles or kind of new agey kind of things you might go to, where it's much more fluid and flexible, and there isn't that container as far as time isn't as tight. It was really important to us that we actually keep that container really clean.
And I think that your analogy that I think you've probably talked about this before, about the river with no banks, right?
Right. Turns into a swamp.
Turns into a swamp. We don't want that, right? So we're bringing that kind of a lens into what we're doing. But why?
Well, because the other way is not working.
Right.
Right.
From either side.
The very kind of masculine, And again, we use the words feminine and masculine. This is not about gender.
No.
So another way of talking about it is that we talk about it as doing and being.
Yeah,
right?
I think we like that, right?
Yeah. So there's the doing, which is like action oriented, goal oriented, outcomes based, and that's some people kind of go into an extreme of that. And then there's the being, which is around flow and spontaneity and inspiration and love and connection. Again, some people kind of go into the extreme of that. And I think what we're bringing in advanced consciousness therapy is really a meeting point in the middle of those two ways of interacting as a helping professional.
Right. And so from some of the ancient teachings, we know that for a very long time, that's been kind of almost described as a war. Of those two things, like the being is going to win or the doing is going to win.
Right.
But the reality is we need to get rid of that completely.
That way of thinking about it.
Because we both, in every being, there's both. Mm-hmm. Right? So we're really at war with ourselves.
And the other twist on it is that the being actually has to come first.
Okay. So that's very different. So then if you're looking at it from that lens, and most of what we have in Western society is from the doing side.
Right.
It's going to need to suppress the being side.
Well, okay, I just think about a typical doctor's appointment.
Okay.
Right? So the doctor goes in, they ask some questions, and then they go out. Before they go in, has that doctor actually checked in on how they are. Yeah. Right? How they're showing up before they step in to help a person. And there's no training in that in medical school, according to my friends who are doctors. They actually don't.
In fact, it's
kind of the opposite. It's kind of ignore what you're experiencing and push through for the patient. And we're saying, no. There's got to be a different way, because the rates of like burnout and overwhelm in the helping professions it's ludicrous.
It's crazy, right? And I know I just had a friend talk to me about in dentistry, especially the rate of suicide among dentists is I should have that ready, but I don't. But it's catastrophic.
And thinking about, again, the dentist, that precision and that specific and like the job of a dentist.
And where you are.
And you're right in their field. You're right in the energetic field of the person that you're interacting with.
Right.
But nobody's talking about that part, right? Nobody's talking about what it means to be sitting with someone who's having a really, really bad day. And you're a practitioner that hasn't been trained in any of that.
No, and if you think about it, most of us don't really enjoy going to the dentist. So we're having a bad day when
because we're at the dentist.
Right?
All my dentist friends are going to write your comments of my dentist friends.
No, but I think that's an acknowledged thing, right? So if you
they're already wound up. The patient is already wound up.
Sit in with 10 or 20 people like that a day.
Yeah, and what impact does that have on your physiology?
Yes, all of that stuff. So what advanced consciousness therapy and learning about it is how to maintain your alignment regardless. And because of the person you're sitting with.
And not by putting up walls.
No.
Which is how we're taught in the mainstream.
Okay.
Even therapists are taught about, I've used words like boundaries or bracketing, or there's these different things that we teach, like when I was teaching at universities, how to distance yourself from your client. And it's unnatural, right? Even if people use all these tools.
When you slow it down, it's like, so I want to help you with an emotional problem
but
that
I'm not going to invest in you.
Well, never mind. I'm not even going to open up any emotional channel from an energetic standpoint. Yeah. We're like, okay, I'm going to close off mine, and you open up yours. Like it doesn't connect.
But the reason we've been taught that way is there's no alternative.
Right. So we have an alternative now, right? We
have,
right. So we're really excited about that. I've been doing this for a while, and if for me, coming from my background, and I, think have worked really hard on the balance of, and the kind of the lens of the being and the doing. So in your session, right, my first thing is always to show up, and that's the being piece.
And there's a process to that.
Oh yeah, there's a process that can be learned and taught, and so that's kind of what our course is about. But if you do that, you will know what you're supposed to do. Did I say that right? Right?
Yeah, if you and I was a bit skeptical. As someone classically trained, right? I was a bit skeptical of like, well, how am I going to trust that? How am I going to trust that what I'm shown is actually going to help the person? Because I had been that intuitive knowing had been trained out of me. Yeah. Even in a program that was transpersonal, Okay, so I actually did a non-traditional program in a way because they were bringing in the spirituality. But even in that context, it was like we never talked about our intuitive knowing
Right.
as far as working with the client. What's interesting is, so women's retreat.
Ah,
So we've pre-recorded this video so that you could get it on time, but at the viewing of this video at this moment, I am at a women's retreat. And that's one place where I had the freedom to let that intuitive
Right.
guidance move me. Right. And that's partly, I think, why people have such a
of course it
transformational
is.
spirit.
Yeah.
Because I'm
course.
not in that, like,
Yeah,
in that
you
lens
change-
of I need to stay as the
Right.
therapist and I need to stay apart. I just surrendered fully and trusted what was coming through.
Right.
So
But-
once a year, I got a really amazing
Well, and
experience.
I think that you were successful as a therapist because you, as we talked about in the last video, sometimes would kind of, and it's not a, but you kind of stumble into
Right.
being
It's like something
it.
happened,
Yes.
something good happened.
So what we talk about is with the right untraining, we can learn to not do what's been done
Right.
and to learn something new. And that's kind of been our process.
And this is like beyond mental health professionals, right? This is like for people,
Oh,
again,
yeah.
like I said, chiropractors or kinesiologists or gym teachers or anybody who's I used a lot of like body stuff there.
Okay.
Massage therapist. Yeah.
That's all of it. Yeah.
All of those people, because even though you're like, when you're physically touching somebody, you're in their physical space.
Right.
I'm sure you're picking up vibes. I'm sure you're picking up
yeah.
like something, like they're not saying anything, but I can feel something's off. We
Right.
all have that. That's not something gifted to a special few.
Nope.
Right. And if we don't have any framework for that, if we don't have any language for that, if we don't have any training in that, we just think, oh, I just got to put up some walls. And then you become actually less effective.
Oh, way less effective.
And tired.
Yeah, you burn out, and the client doesn't get what they needed either, right? So this one of the beautiful things about the whole field is that we're teaching is that this is good for everybody.
Everybody wins.
Everybody wins, and that's kind of the mark that I use is if there's a loser in the conversation, like if somebody gets less than, then we're doing it wrong.
Which is, again, a revolutionary way of thinking about interacting with others, right? Because I know growing up in a Western society, it's very competition.
Oh yeah,
right?
And outcome
It's
oriented.
very much about a winner and a loser. It's very much about where do you rank,
right?
And so to let that go has been a process for me, right?
Well,
I
think
still
for
have
everybody.
my highlighters and I still have my high standards.
Well, it's okay to be us.
Right. That's the other thing is like learning about this expanded way of being doesn't mean I'm less myself. It means I'm actually more of myself and bringing those gifts into visionary work rather than just grunt work.
Right. And that when you say that, being yourself, you're actually birthing who you really are, right? Right. And who you were really meant to be. And that is the work of the divine feminine. Or the being piece. So what's the other piece then? The doing piece is supposed to be supporting and honoring that in ourselves and in others. So not being afraid when somebody goes off script a little bit. And so as a practitioner, allowing ourselves to go off script. And in so doing, that freedom translates to the client.
Absolutely. Because we like you always say, Texas, when you ask a different question, you get a different answer.
Yeah.
And if we've trained ourselves to only ask certain questions while interacting with our clients.
Yeah.
And that's limited.
And if that's the case, then we're also training the client to only say certain things.
Right. I've had clients who like they'll say, I've seen, 4 other therapists, but I've never told anybody this. And this is the key thing that was holding them back. But they've never actually spoken those words because the questions that were being asked were skirting around those really difficult.
And sometimes we know that we don't have to even ask a question. We just have to show up and be open. So it's kind of a joke with folks who work with me. Usually people sit down and they start to cry.
Even at dinner parties, it's the funniest thing.
Yeah, I'm really great to have at a party.
But they'll just be like, hello. And they're like, because you're so open.
Right.
And so like such a soft place to land that people can just just let go of that resistance.
Right. And so there's more healing in that moment.
Right. Than any conversation.
Right. So I think it gives us also license to not have to do so much.
Right.
right?
Because the being comes first.
Yeah, and we build framework for that. So yeah, so if this is so good, we're so really excited. You might
get some of that.
Yeah.
Feel the vibe. If you're around on June 7th, we'd
Yeah.
love to invite you to our event. It's going to be live streamed and in person. So there's more information on that on our website. So check that out. And if you're interested in, as a practitioner, learning a little bit more about this, if you're curious, if your curiosity is piqued, send us an email. The email address we'll put somewhere here at the end. Yeah. And then we'll kind of let you know about, because we have a wait list that's starting to form for our next intake that's coming up for our practitioner training as well.
Yeah, and that's going to be, so if you're just sitting there going, what's different about this? You will be different at the end of it, right? That
totally different.
And that's really exciting for most of us, because sometimes we're stuck.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So. And if some people are okay. Like, you might be like, yeah, you know what? I don't really need a change right now. That's okay.
Yeah.
But if you feel like, oh yeah, I've been looking for something. I've been looking for that thing that is going to take me to the next level, not just professionally, but also personally, and have that real breakthrough.
Yeah.
It might be a good fit.
Thanks.
See you next time.
Bye for now. See you later.